Welcome to Veg Travel Guides. Today I'll introduce the main types of accommodation available in Japan. Some of these are so unique that online booking agencies don't always describe them correctly, so tourists sometimes turn up at their accommodation in Japan with no idea that they've booked a sleeping capsule they can't fit inside or an inappropriate love hotel for their children. So I'll differentiate between some common types of Japanese accommodation, demystify others, and hopefully help you to figure out what types of places you might like to stay at in Japan now that the border restrictions are being eased. As with my guidebooks, I took all the photographs shown in this video myself while travelling in Japan. First, let's look at traditional accommodation. Upmarket traditional Japanese inns are called ryokan. Most have tatami rooms and traditional sliding doors called husuma. For foreign tourists, staying in a ryokan can be a wonderful cultural experience, and because rooms are mostly self-contained, language barriers aren't usually a problem. Many ryokan have their own onsen, that's hot spring baths, either shared ones or private ones in the guest rooms. Most ryokan are located in the countryside, especially in towns famous for hot springs, but there are also some very good, and mostly very expensive, ones in Kyoto and on the sacred island of Miyajima, near Hiroshima. Traditional, low-priced Japanese inns are called minshuku. Like ryokan, most minshuku have tatami rooms, but minshuku rooms are usually smaller, and most don't have private bathrooms. Guests at minshuku are usually expected to make their own beds from provided bedding, which, being Japan, is of course always clean and comfortable. Prices for a tiny minshuku room can go for as little as 2,000 yen in some smaller cities, that's under $20, and even less in Osaka on weeknights. While minshuku offer many of the best value private rooms in Japan, I generally don't recommend them to foreign travellers who aren't familiar with the Japanese language and customs, even ones which accept reservations through international booking agencies like Booking.com and Agoda, although I'll explain later why I don't recommend using these agencies in Japan. Now that we've covered the differences between ryokan and minshuku, let's look at what they have in common, which is so much that the line actually blurs between them. Most ryokan and minshuku offer breakfast which is included in the price, and some also provide dinner, especially ones in the countryside. Unless it advertises or is known to offer special meals, I suggest vegans, vegetarians, and anyone with other dietary requirements either book rooms without meals if available, or at least advise the owners in advance that meals won't be required. Most ryokan and minshuku are run by people with little or no understanding of any dietary needs, even common allergies, and it's not culturally appropriate to ask for special meals, especially at short notice. Another thing ryokan and minshuku have in common is sleeping on the floor. While it's actually healthier to sleep on a hard surface, and most people do get used to it after a while, it can make for some sleepless nights for many foreign tourists soon after arriving in Japan. It's time for a brief note for viewers from Taiwan, Hong Kong, or anyone else who can read traditional Chinese. The word ryokan in Japanese literally means traveller's building, and it uses the same kanji, that's traditional Chinese characters, as the word for luguan in Chinese. But a ryokan is an upmarket lodging, while a luguan generally refers to an inexpensive place to stay the night, more like a minshuku in Japan or a hostel in English. The word minshuku, however, which literally means guest house in Japanese, uses the same characters and has a similar meaning to the word minsu in Chinese, which translates to homestay. A great way to experience traditional accommodation in Japan is to stay in a Buddhist temple. Many temples serve their guests shojin rori, that's traditional exquisite Buddhist cuisine, and the whole package usually costs much less than the accommodation and the food would if they were bought separately. Perhaps the best, or at least the most popular place to experience shukubo, that's temple lodging, is at Koyasan, which I cover in my guidebook and plan to make a video about in the future. This sacred World Heritage Site is the resting place of Kukei, Japan's most famous monk and scholar, who studied Buddhism in China and brought great wisdom back to Japan. He also invented hiragana and katakana, Japan's two phonetic alphabets. Another interesting twist on Japanese accommodation I recommend is vegan minshuku Sanbiki Neko in Kyoto. It's located in a quiet neighbourhood close to Kyoto Station and the Higashiyama district, which is home to many of the city's most famous temples. Sanbiki humbly calls itself a minshuku, but rooms are large, well-furnished, and equipped with their own bathrooms, which make them more like ryokan rooms than minshuku rooms. But, aside from the many rooms, the rest of the building is like a new Japanese home, which it basically is. The not-so-traditional twist on Sanbiki is that it's run by an Australian couple, so if you speak English you won't have any language barriers communicating with your hosts. But the whole experience is certainly Japanese, and Craig even cooks a delicious, authentic Japanese breakfast in the morning. Craig and Helen are, naturally, very familiar with Kyoto, including the big-ticket temples popular with tourists, and also some quieter and very beautiful ones around their neighbourhood, which I highly recommend exploring. A night's accommodation here costs a little under 10,000 yen per person, which is great value for boutique accommodation with breakfast in the cultural and historic capital of Japan. As charming as these traditional lodgings are, there just isn't enough space for them in large cities, where the most common type of accommodation on offer is what's known as a business hotel. These are very similar to 2 or 3 star hotels elsewhere in the world, but the Japanese twist comes with just how tiny the rooms are. In these hotels, you're just paying for the room and possibly a simple breakfast. Service is minimal, so even if you can speak enough Japanese or the staff speak English, please don't ask for help beyond basic needs like luggage storage, and many business hotels don't even offer that, due to a lack of space. But business hotels are virtually always clean, comfortable, very functional, and excellent value for money. The term business hotel dates back to when these hotels were mostly used by business people who spent all their time at their office or factory and just needed a bed for the night and a desk to work at. But with Japan's recent tourism explosion, combined with the rise of online meetings, many business hotels now serve more tourists than business people, or at least they did before the borders were closed in 2020. There are several large chains of business hotels. My favourite is the Upper Hotel chain, which provides what it calls simplified luxury, but I call it miniaturized luxury. I would never have realised that hotel rooms could be as small as some upper hotels manage to make them, but every square centimetre is used efficiently, and I find them perfect for guidebook writing in the evening followed by a good night's sleep. In my opinion, upper hotels offer some of the best value hotel rooms I've stayed at anywhere in the world. Upper's owner, Toshio Matoya, is a staunch Japanese nationalist who is most famous for his claims that the so-called Rape of Nanking didn't happen as it's presented in the West and in China. In all his hotel rooms, he places copies of his periodicals, Theoretical Modern History of Japan, in which he shares his political views in English and in Japanese, so the Chinese government asks its citizens to boycott the chain. Now, I'm never going to glorify any aspect of war from either side, but the reality is that the winner of a war writes the history books, and I think it's important that all perspectives are heard and challenges to the mainstream narrative are allowed, especially to accounts which were written during or after the chaos of a world war. I personally enjoy reading his essays and considering the history I learned at high school from another perspective, but if you prefer to spend your time exploring beautiful Japan than delving into its not-so-beautiful past, then his books can stay in the drawers, where they're placed so discreetly that I stayed in upper hotels for many years before I even noticed them. Another famous business hotel chain is the Toyota Inn, which won the Guinness World Record for the largest hotel room with 100% occupancy in May 2015, when all 48,831 rooms around the world were occupied. Toyota rooms are virtually all identical, sometimes disturbingly so. I stayed in these 2 rooms, in different cities, on 2 consecutive nights, took photos as I do as a travel writer, and didn't realise just how similar they were until reviewing my photographs several days later. Compared with upper hotels, Toyota rooms are on average slightly larger, but I don't find them any more comfortable, and they often cost more, so I prefer upper hotels. Compared with other countries, hotels in Japan offer a lot of single rooms which are significantly cheaper than double or family rooms. Besides a high level of personal safety, this is another reason why Japan is a great destination for solo travellers. But single rooms can be truly tiny, so if you're claustrophobic or have a lot of luggage, you might want to book a double room. At the higher end of the scale, 4 and 5 star hotels in Japan are much the same as anywhere else in the world, but of course the customer service is impeccable. Perhaps the most famous type of accommodation in Japan is the Capsule Hotel, which offers sleeping pods so small that anyone over about 6 feet needs to apply Pythagoras' theorem just to fit in. Capsule hotels are really just a Japanese version of a shared dormitory, but with improved privacy and comfort, because everyone has their own space, however tiny that space is. Capsule Hotels originally catered almost exclusively to sararimen, that's male office workers, who stayed out late drinking with their colleagues and missed their last train home. When I first began staying in them well over a decade ago, I was often the only foreigner, and while it's probably like that again now with the border closures, many capsule hotels now offer rooms on international booking agencies, and some are even designed especially for tourists, most famously the 9 Hours chain, which has a branch in Tokyo's Narita International Airport. One positive aspect of this change from catering to salarymen to travellers is that many have finally started to accept women, usually on separate floors to men, as everyone changes in one locker room. Some are also making the capsules slightly larger and even introducing luggage storage spaces and fold-out desks into the capsules. Some capsule hotels also offer premium capsules with more space and a small desk, but these often cost more than private rooms in business hotels, which are generally more comfortable and convenient. One chain in Tokyo even tried offering double capsules for couples, but it closed even before the borders did. One off-putting factor for many foreign tourists in capsule hotels, and many minshuku, is that guests are expected to use communal showers, which are usually beside the ohudo or shared bath. Please be very careful to follow Japanese bathing etiquette. Most importantly, wash thoroughly before entering the bath, and always ensure that your shower water doesn't splash other bathers or run into the communal bath. Many capsule hotels don't accept guests with large tattoos, which in Japan are almost exclusively associated with criminal gangs called yakuza. Although the tourist boom was making it harder before the border closures, it's often possible to just turn up at a capsule hotel without a reservation, as long as you arrive before the drunk salami men roll in, which is generally around midnight. Apart from the ones with inbuilt luggage storage, most capsule hotels offer only narrow lockers designed for business attire and perhaps a briefcase, but some allow guests to store larger luggage at the reception. It might be better to store your suitcase in a coin locker at a nearby train station, or, even better, use the excellent Takuhaiban courier system to send it to your next destination, and only carry the clothes you need for a day or two at a time. But Takuhaiban is a topic for another video. For solo male travellers who aren't claustrophobic, I recommend trying a capsule hotel at least once for the experience, and hopefully more will accept women in the near future. If travelling on a budget, capsule hotels offer an excellent deal, especially if you want to stay right in the centre of a large city and don't want to book too far in advance. But for 2 or more people, it's generally cheaper and more comfortable to stay in a business hotel. If capsules and shared bathrooms and locker rooms all sound like too much trouble just for a cheap bed, most cities in Japan which are popular with foreign tourists have Western-style hostels, and many foreign travellers choose to stay at them for the familiarity and the chance of meeting fellow travellers. Another advantage, especially for vegetarians and vegans, is that most Western hostels have kitchens, and, being Japan, of course they're virtually always clean. However, cities with hostels generally also cater well to vegetarians, vegans, and people with other dietary needs, and I generally don't recommend hostels in Japan. Private rooms in hostels often cost about as much as rooms in business hotels, but are usually not nearly as comfortable, and hostel dormitories usually cost about the same amount as capsule hotels, and they probably have about the same density of bodies per cubic metre, but I feel much more comfortable in my own capsule than surrounded by sleeping bodies in a Western-style dorm room. It's worth a brief mention of pensions, which are kind of in between minshuku, hostels, and budget hotels. Pensions are usually located in the countryside, especially ski areas, and are generally family-run businesses similar to minshuku, except that they have Western-style rooms and beds instead of the traditional tatami rooms and futons found in minshuku and ryokans. Pensions are especially popular with skiers who just need a comfortable bed for the night. Now for a class of accommodation all on its own, let's look at the infamous love hotels. Most love hotels offer either a rest for a few hours or an overnight stay. In order to protect the privacy of their patrons, many love hotels have discreet entrances and separate exits. Many also sell rooms from vending machines at the entrance, or else cash in the room key are exchanged through a hole in the wall without any face-to-face contact with the receptionist. Some love hotels offer themed rooms which I'll leave to the imagination or a Google search, but others look quite like normal hotel rooms, except most are larger and more colourful than the nondescript rooms found in most business hotels. Since their traditional clientele mostly only stay during weekends, many love hotels have begun offering rooms on international booking sites at heavily discounted prices during the working week. While these can be good deals, please check the photos carefully and know what you're booking, especially if you're travelling with children. While teaching in Japan soon after the Great Tohoku earthquake, one of my young middle school students told me a story about the weirdest hotel he'd ever stayed in on the night of the earthquake. Since all the trains stopped running, his family and many thousands of other daily commuters needed to spend the night in Tokyo, and I guess that love hotel room was the only one they could find. If you're watching this, then chances are you'll be travelling with a Japan Rail Pass. If so, I suggest considering what I call Shinkansen commuting, which is what I do on research trips for my guidebook. Instead of staying in the central cities, I often take the Shinkansen, that's the high-speed or bullet train, to a nearby city, perhaps 15 or 20 minutes ride away, and stay in a business hotel beside that train station. These business hotel rooms can be significantly cheaper than even capsule hotels or hostel beds in the central cities. Without the rail pass, the commuting costs would easily eat up any savings, But with the Japan Rail Pass, the extra Shinkansen ride is effectively free, and this is one way to get extra value from it. It's also exactly what the government wants. One reason they offer tourists such a great deal is to spread the tourist yen around the country. Of course, staying in a bedroom city half an hour away isn't the same as staying downtown in an historic capital like Kyoto, but if you just want a comfortable and inexpensive bed for the night, then Shinkansen commuting can be well worth the time and effort. It's especially good for travelling between cities. For example, if travelling from Kyoto or Osaka to Tokyo, have dinner in Kyoto or Osaka, then take the Shinkansen to Nagoya or even a smaller city along the way where hotels are even cheaper, stay the night there, get up early and take the train to Tokyo and you'll arrive in time for breakfast. Finally, how should you reserve rooms? First, reserve them. Japanese are organised people who plan virtually everything well in advance, and so should tourists. During the off-season, it's usually possible to book a room in a small city or in Tokyo at short notice, but for weekends, popular holiday times like Golden Week and the New Year period, and the cherry blossom and autumn foliage seasons, booking ahead is usually essential. It's unknown how the tourism industry will rebound once the borders reopen, but many people around the world have said that they'd like to visit either Japan or Taiwan for their first overseas holiday once the borders do reopen, so I expect Japan to be very busy. If you'll stay at Toryoka or Upper hotel chains, then I suggest booking the rooms directly on their websites. For Toryoka Inns, it's worth buying a membership card if you'll spend more than a couple of nights, as it offers a 10% discount and a generous loyalty program. Unfortunately, most smaller hotels offer rooms cheaper through third-party booking agencies than on their own websites or at their reception desks. But I strongly recommend avoiding the big international agencies, especially Booking.com and Agoda. Agoda used to be the go-to agency for business and other regular travellers, including myself, as in return for their hefty commissions they used to stand by their bookings. But this is no longer the case, so they're now just a redundant middleman between the hotels and the tourists, except Agoda are actually now using Booking.com's database, making them a redundant middleman between the real middleman, that's Booking.com, and the customer, creating no end of problems, especially given that many hotel staff in Japan don't speak much English. I especially recommend steering clear of Booking.com and Agoda's homes. I generally don't recommend staying in Airbnb-style apartments in Japan, but if you're going to do it, I suggest at least using Airbnb, as they have many years of experience in this industry, while Booking.com and Agoda's systems still have some fine-tuning needed, to put it mildly. If you do choose to book hotel rooms using a third party, which is usually cheaper for small independent hotels and other accommodation options, I highly recommend using the Japanese sites Jarlan and Japan I Can. The latter has a particular focus on traditional accommodation like ryokans. In many countries, especially Taiwan, if I want to extend a stay at a hotel, I consider it polite to ask the hotel if they'll extend it first, and usually they offer the room for the same price as I paid online, essentially saving themselves the middleman's commission fees. But this should never be asked for in Japan. If you ask to extend a stay at a reception desk, they'll charge you rates. So if you want to extend a booking made with an online agency, I suggest making another online booking and then showing it to the reception staff, but expect to need to switch rooms. It's all the more reason for planning ahead and booking a stay all at once. On a final note, when it comes to accommodation in Japan, I recommend being as adventurous as your circumstances allow and trying at least one unique form of Japanese accommodation. It may just end up being a highlight of your trip. Thanks for watching.